Joespeak podcast. But check this out. Sometimes I do like an initial drop for a minute or so and say, get ready, because this is who I have, and here's why. But this time, we get to get right into the nitty gritty because this person's got so many stories and got so much stuff that I want. I'm just excited about listening. I might just kind of give it to her and say, okay, talk for 30 minutes and leave me out of it. But anyway, this is my sister here, Toni Momberger. People know Toni for different reasons. Some because she's been in Redlands all her life. Some because she has been an incredibly consequential member of the city council. Some because she's been in business. Some because she's written children's books. Some because she's been a journalist for 20 or 30 years. But I thought that we would just take the opportunity to have a conversation. When this posts, we're going to call it Communication Comedy, COMITY, even though there might be some comedy here, COMEDY. There certainly was in our little pre-shoot. Communication, comedy, and community, because I think that those are three words that really emphasize who you are. So, Toni, thank you for being here. How are you today?
I'm wonderful, thank you. I'm out of the house.
Yeah, that's what I was getting ready to say. It's like you don't get out of the house a lot. And right away, when Mom watches this, your mom is, one of my other moms. And when I say Mom Diane. We're still very safe. I want you to know that, the masks are right here. Everybody's cool. I'm serious.
Are within reach.
And I've got one of my shots already. I mean, I'm Pfizer 1 here. But in any event, that's another story. But hi, Mom. So
I want to interrupt you here, if
I
may, and tell you, I know you joke around and you call her Mom and you send her a card on Mother's Day and you check in on her. And I'm an only child. And I really think it means more to me than you realize to share my mom with somebody. And the idea of it is it makes me happy. It makes me feel like we belong to a tribe together, and that there is a little community there among us, and I love it.
I've learned that it takes a village, and she's certainly part of it. She is a voice of reason for me. We've had conversations sometimes for hours at a time about Redlands politics, because it is kind of the juggernaut you try to, unwrap and unravel. But she means a great deal for me. One of the things that was really funny, a funny story, and I sense there'll be a couple of these. We were at the Democratic Convention a couple years ago, and we were in the Progressives meeting. And we sat in there together, locked arms. And at some point, we're looking at each other like, I don't feel very progressive right now based on what's being said. How about you? No, we really felt like we were out there if you don't believe this, and this, you're not a progressive, so it's just really funny. It reminds me, too, of the generational thing that we have in politics. And I don't think we'll talk about politics a lot here, but because you really are representative and found a way to be representative without being political, which I think is very rare. But there is this generational thing where my daughter texts me all the time. They all think X, Y, Z. I'm like, who's they? The Twitter sphere, the younger people, whatever else. Well, it's not parsed that simple. And even though they know some things that we don't, they're better at technology, and they can kind of push a button and, move a country because of the technology and things like that. There's still some very basic and fundamental things that us old folks did. Even when you guys get to, muse about, the change you're going to make at a restaurant that you don't have to fight and sit at the counter and make a protest in order to eat at. You know what I mean?
Right.
You can't skip over us entirely,
right.
is what I'm saying. And so, the young folks are going to do their thing. So, but in the event.
I will talk about politics for a minute. I became a journalist at the age of 19.
Right.
And so I never felt like I could be partisan. And
sure.
In 1989, it was a lot easier not to be partisan.
Right.
And I don't know what party my best friends belong to, or some of my boyfriends, and it just was. I can't imagine today having a relationship with somebody and not knowing what their political party was. But in that time, it was easier, and I was committed to it because as a journalist, your job is not to form your own opinion; it's to gather data and present it in a clear and understandable way. So So I did that for 30 years.
Right.
And I didn't have a party. I was raised in a family, well, growing up, and I think this is probably true of a lot of people.
Right.
We didn't really talk about politics that much.
Right.
It just wasn't there. I had some sense that my parents were registered Democrats.
Right.
But it was just not something that was a big deal. And I became a journalist, and I was working as a journalist when Howard Dean ran for president.
Right.
And that had to have been 2004.
I think I want to say it's 2000 or 2004. Yeah.
And
maybe 2004.
and all of a sudden, my parents they started to get involved with him.
Right.
And then they started getting involved in some local measures, and then there was some supporting local business activism, and
Right.
one thing picked up, and there was transition. My mom founded this group to transition parolees.
Right, sure.
So that, and then just one thing after another started snowballing, and they became extremely political active.
Right.
So this was the last 10 years of my dad's life. When my dad died in 2014, I'm at the funeral, and all of these people are getting up, and all they're talking about is his political activism. And I thought, sorry, this is so strange to me, because I knew him for, almost 40 years outside of this
Right.
reality that you guys
Sure.
hold him in.
Yeah.
He has such a, he's, to me, the story is about him being able to fix everything, or being kind of quiet and teaching me how to work on a car.
Right. Yeah.
We worked on classic cars together, and
Right.
teaching me how to throw a basketball. Right, I was the
Right.
only kid, and I loved that kind of stuff. So, I got up there, and I gave a eulogy for him. I didn't expect to speak at his service, but I got
Right.
up there, and I said, "Can you imagine what it's like to have my job and my parents at the same time?"
Right.
Was kind of how I kicked it off, because it was very difficult for me
Right.
to be the editor of a paper
Right.
in a small town community that is really polarized over a lot of things.
Yeah.
If you look at Redlands, is like eager to find a issue to split about.
Right, yeah,
At
sure.
least it has been for the past 20 years, maybe.
Right.
I mean, it was, started out preservation versus development, and then
Right.
you can throw on, we got Occupy versus the Tea Party, you got
Right.
Redlands, you got the Democrats versus the Republicans. You have
Right.
Wildcats versus Terriers. I
Right.
mean, people
Yes,
are
you
ready
do.
to hate over these issues.
Yeah.
And they're so eager to call the editor biased.
Right. Sure.
And then I got my parents out there giving people a reason to accuse me of having a bias. So I was
Right.
really aggressively nonpartisan.
Right,
I
sure.
was really
Went out of your way.
Right. And I had to, I even got to say, all right, I'm a terrier, but my kids are wildcats, and I'm trying to tell you that I will be
Right.
fair.
Right.
Because I got accused of those things. I got hate calls.
Did you really?
Oh, yeah. People would say, you're covering this school more than the other. And I had to keep hash marks
Right.
to show, here's how many stories and the dates that I've done about each, and they're even.
Right.
Anyway, politics was something that kind of came into the family later. And then when I became a councilwoman, this is a nonpartisan position.
Right. Yeah.
And what you're talking about, it wasn't just coincidental. I was, in everything I did, I said, I have to make sure that every single person that I represent feels that
Right.
I can represent them.
Right.
I have got to be committed to not having a bias in any direction, in any way that we might be split.
Right.
And people split different ways. They're the anti-Walmart and the pro-Walmart
Right.
split. And then you
Right.
see the same people allied there that are going to be split later when you talk about red versus
Right.
blue. So I just felt I was aggressive about that.
Did you
so thank you for noticing.
How did you know? Well, did you ever think you would be on city council?
No.
How did that come up then?
I'm 51 years old, and I've spent most of my life saying I haven't yet decided what I want to be when I grow up. I mean, I
Right.
literally never had a plan.
Right.
I never looked ahead 5 years and said, what goal do I want to end at, and why don't I start working toward that goal today? And
Right.
it's one of my biggest regrets is that I didn't ever map that out and
Mm-hmm.
prepare myself to do something. Everything in my life except for my husband is something that I just fell into.
Right.
It was in front of me, and I just said yes to it.
Right.
My husband, I said that one, and I went after it. But
Right.
but everything else was an accident. And I used to say, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I absolutely know I will never be a politician.
Right.
I will never try. And part of it is fear.
Yeah, sure.
I'm pretty thin-skinned, and I see
Right.
these people who you have to stick your neck out
Right.
for criticism.
Right.
Basically being a politician is saying, I see what problems exist that are things that I'm invested in, or people I care about are invested in the outcome.
Right.
And I think I'm in a position with my skills or strengths or experience to solve them.
Right.
I have some answers, and I want to work for the good of my community.
Right.
And the price of that, part of it is monetary, but the other price of it is I have to put myself up for people to dig into my history and dig into my family and pass judgment.
Right.
I have to present myself for criticism. And
Right.
if you don't like it,
Right.
people say, well, you asked for this.
Right. Sure. Yeah. No sympathy for
You
it.
asked for us to vote for you. You wanted
Right.
to be high profile
Right.
and presented for attack. And I'm not asking for that. I didn't want to ever ask for that.
Was there anything in particular that made you see that, you know what, this is what I need to do now? Because it's certainly not something that was on your heart's desire to do.
No, when I left the paper, so I was the editor of the Redlands Daily Facts, and I said one day, the right thing for me to do at this time is to leave. And
Right.
that was in part, several things happened, but one morning really broke it for me. It was a Saturday morning, and there was a nasty comment on a Facebook group that had 40,000 members. It was a big community group, and somebody made this comment about the lazy journalism in the paper, and I can't even tell you what my reaction. I can't describe how painful it was. I thought, my kids come home from out of state to visit, and I miss their whole visit because I want to make sure that this community does, that nothing happens in this town that isn't represented in this paper.
Right.
That there isn't a voice or a perspective or an event that isn't covered, and I don't have the staff for that, so I do it myself.
Right.
I'm sacrificing my sleep and my family time and everything
Right.
to do this. And this person who made this comment is a PIO for an organization in town that sent us information. And so my husband walked into the bedroom with coffee. I was scrolling on my iPad when I saw it, and he saw my face, and he said, "What?" And I just turned the screen toward him, and he said, "Toni, I'm not letting you out of this bed until you've written your resignation letter. This job is killing you." He said, "I have watched your health decline. I've watched you go, your mental health is gone, your physical health is gone. You are not, I wasn't,
Yeah, but I get it.
but he said, it's killing you. You're dying in front of my eyes." And I actually held out for hours. I had to pee so bad, and he wouldn't let me out of the bed. He says, "You write that resignation letter." And I wrote it, but it was a lot of things at once. But that was the moment that broke me.
Yeah,
That
was it.
Facebook comment calling me a lazy journalist. And I could explain why I did what I did that she was critical of.
Right.
And I would do it again today. It was good journalism what I did. But
Right.
but at any rate, I left that job, and I had a plan. We had this big 3-story, 4,000 plus square foot craftsman home near the university that we were renting out, and the lease was going to expire. I wanted to run a bed and breakfast. I wanted to do it. I imagined this community gathering place where we put a grand piano in there, and we did sing-alongs, and sometimes it would be disco, and sometimes
Right.
Beatles, and sometimes Broadway, and
Right.
Tuesday sing-alongs, and I'd make dessert, and everybody was invited, and we could do, I could do haunted Redlands tours. I wanted to get a big shuttle bus or
Yeah.
like a trolley,
My God.
and do brewery tours.
Right.
Even people in town could
Right.
stay there and have, get drunk at the 3 breweries that we had at the time, local craft breweries, stay the night and have breakfast in the morning, not have to drive. I would shuttle. Anyway, I had these big dreams for this.
Right.
And
sure.
something happened to impede that. But at the same time, in this interim period, Pat Gilbreth died.
Yeah, sure. Right.
And it was unexpected. She had just been elected for a 4-year reelected for a 4-year term, and she had served 1 year.
Right.
And I was in a position. Some people felt like I would be good in that seat, who I cared about,
Right.
and respected and valued.
Right.
And they came to me, and factually, I mean that's an opinion, but factually, they were just about to vote on the general plan. I had read that thing cover to cover more than once because of my time at the paper.
Right.
We were about to break ground on the Redlands Passenger Rail project. I knew the history of that. I knew what the future of that project. Like, there were several pieces of context.
Right.
And part of what I brought at the facts to my paper vision was I wanted to learn as much as I could about Redlands history. I mean, I knew the past, however many years I'd lived here. I knew the history of what it was like here in the 70s, 80s. But I wanted to bring whatever we were looking at now and in the future into context with history. I wanted to wrap it all up.
Right.
So for I imagine those reasons,
Right.
people that I cared about asked me to serve, and I stewed over it, and I talked about it with Doug and the kids and my mom, and I came back and said, all right, I'll apply for it. Now, a lot of people started saying, oh, she's the appointee apparent, right? They're just we're just going through this process for show.
Right.
We all know Toni's going to get it. That was awful, because I felt the pressure of really going in there and proving that I was going to be the best applicant.
Right, sure.
So I studied everything. I read the CAFR. I studied everything. I went and took tours of things. I really showed up ready to answer anything.
Right.
And I thought of people, and I knew they were tuning in, and they were going to watch this application process, and they were going to have to be able to say, she was clearly the best applicant.
Right.
It wasn't a gimme. She deserves this.
Right.
Well, we get there, and the technical equipment didn't work.
Oh, wow.
Nobody saw it.
Right.
And they went forward saying, well, she got it because she's friends with the people on the council, and there's shenanigans. This is backdoor dealings and all of the things.
Well, people are going to say what they want to say, but I think what happens is you get on, from our standpoint, from the standpoint of many of us, is that you are the fact guru. You know what I mean? You've never been afraid of facts, and so you're looking for them. So when you're at a convention or something, you are posting, here are the choices for the 1 o'clock. Which one should I go to? I mean, you really were seeking to be representative. What were some of the things that surprised you about being on council, and maybe things that didn't so much surprise you? Because it was certainly a new endeavor, right? What people would call politics. And I would say, you swore you'd never be a politician. I would argue you never were.
I was, and I was a journalist the whole time.
You were in politics, but you weren't of politics, and you weren't political. And frankly, that's what was refreshing, and that's what was good, right? You know what I mean? But talk about some of the surprises that you faced.
Well, I was full of fear. Everything I did was motivated by fear of not being prepared. I recognize that I'm voting on stuff that's going to have longevity, and I better know every single thing about what I'm voting on.
Right.
So I would get that agenda. One of the things I did, by the way, that I'm proudest of, if I may say this, the agenda would come out on Friday at closing, Friday at 5. And the meeting was on Tuesday. Right. And I'm looking at this from a journalist perspective and from a representative perspective. I need to know what the community feels about the things on our agenda.
Right.
And in order for that to happen, the news reporter assigned to the city needs to be able to get the agenda in enough advance to read it and say, okay, here are the things the community might want to care about.
Right.
Let me do an objective analysis, right? Let me interview people on both sides of this issue.
Right.
Let me get information in the paper before the meeting in enough time for people to write letter. Well, at the time it was to show up in person, right? To prepare, because it's a big deal for people to come and speak. I remember my dad, who was he didn't public speak.
Right.
He got up there to speak against something once, and I watched him on TV talking in public comment, and he was shaking. I was so proud of him because I know it was scary for him to do that. But I went into the city manager on the first day, and I said, you've got to release the agenda early enough for the paper to have a chance to do a good objective coverage of what's coming.
Right. Yeah.
So people can prepare their public comment if they want to engage with it.
Right.
That is so important. And what happened was the Daily Facts was the paper that that covered Redlands, and they didn't have a Monday edition.
Right.
So if it comes out on Friday and they're not staffed on the weekend and there's no Monday paper, they start Tuesday morning.
Right.
That's when they start. And all they could do was basically put a little bullet point, here are some of the issues, if they even did that. And so I got them to release it on Wednesday, which gives them a chance. And sometimes they do it on Thursday if something comes up. But that's made a really big difference.
Right.
You asked me a totally different question. Oh, fear.
Right.
So
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
get the agenda. Sorry, I just went on a total tangent. I would get this
it's
agenda, and I would take an issue or a thing. I'd read through the whole thing, read the staff reports, and then I would look at it like I was doing coverage on it.
Yeah.
I would go find people on both sides of the issue, and as a
Right.
journalist, you have that database, right? You've
Right.
got that source list. I would find people and say, here's what I'm inclined to think about this, talk me out of it, right? So I could, because I was so scared that I was going to get up there and vote on it, and then people were going to get up there and say, that was really dumb, what about this thing that
Right.
you didn't think of or
Right.
didn't know?
Right. Yeah.
It was your job to know. You
Right.
asked to sit up there, and then you didn't take the responsibility to know this thing, and you voted wrong.
Right.
And I was so scared of that. I would wake up in the middle of the night
Yeah.
with a stomach ache and start
Right.
doing more research. Like,
Right.
this
Wow.
was awful.
Yeah.
But I needed to make sure. So then I very quickly started thinking, we got something in front of us about one of the departments that we had to vote on whether to fund a thing. I don't remember what it was.
Right.
And I thought, well, the people who work in that department know better than I do about this thing.
Right.
And I started scheduling ride-alongs. So
Right, sure.
I was trying to spend a day with every different kind of employee that we had on city staff that I
Gotcha.
might be voting on. And I would ask them, what do we do well that I should be protecting? And what
Right.
really needs to change here that,
Right.
that you would be, and would you be available to me if something comes up on the agenda that I could call you and
Yeah.
ask you what you think about this thing?
Right.
That was one of the most rewarding parts of the job.
Right.
People who work for the city of Redlands are good at what they do, and they take so much pride in it.
Yeah.
They so appreciated being part of the discussion, and I
Yeah.
really met some incredible people.
Right.
A lot of them were born here and grew up here, and they're
Yeah.
doing what they do because they're protecting their home,
Yeah.
which is also what I felt like I was doing.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Anyway, yeah, but it's exhausting to serve like that and to
Right.
constantly be afraid.
Right. Well, we all wanted you to stay. I'll ask this. This is kind of one of those things where whether people second guessed you or not in terms of getting on the council, everybody understood you were the truth once you got there.
Thank you.
Because you were fact driven, fact based. I think, beyond reproach, really. And with people that would say otherwise, they were just idiots, so they didn't really matter. But keeping it real, that's another story. But tell me, everybody wanted you to stay, so why'd you decide to leave?
Oh, wow. Well, I didn't want to run in 2018. I wasn't sure I wanted to apply.
Right, sure. Got convinced
Then I
to do
got
that.
on, and then I ran in 2018, and I went through this ridiculous process of capitulating. I was getting pressure from loved ones. You know, we want you to run. You gotta run and be the mayor. They were saying you have a chance
saw
to be
that.
the mayor. They would support you in the mayor seat, and I said, oh my gosh, nope,
Right.
I don't want it.
Yeah.
And I was the first one leaning into the different. I'm running off on a little bit of a tangent, but I was the first one leaning into that microphone and nominate other people because I
Right.
didn't want anybody to nominate me
Right.
to be the mayor. But at any rate, I didn't want to run, and I finally gave in and I ran, and I'm glad I did.
Right.
And a lot of it is because the more, I got in there, once you start seeing yourself, once I decided to apply, once I applied, and once I started serving, I started realizing, boy, some of this stuff that I really want to accomplish, I could accomplish.
Right. Yeah. Sure.
But I need more time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I believed, and I still believe, there was money out there that I could have gone out and gotten.
Right.
But I needed help. And then what happened with the city manager, he said, yeah, there's money. If you're willing to go to Sacramento and you're willing to go to DC to get this money, you can get the funding for some of these big projects.
Right.
Well, part of it is other people had big projects lined up first, right? I was the new kid on the block, and my pet projects were going to come later.
Right.
And I was lining up my ducks for that. So one of the things that happened is the economy crashed.
Right.
And there's no way we were going to be investing in the stuff I wanted to do.
Right.
At that point, it was
Right.
we were in survival mode.
Sure.
Well, that is not my strength.
Right.
I'm not the guy we needed there. I identified somebody else that
Right.
did have those strengths, but at any rate, so that was part of it. But I'm glad I ran. I'm glad I ran in 2018. It was a great experience. I'm glad I served for another 2 years.
Right.
But part of it also is financial,
Right.
right? We get $500 a month.
Yeah.
Well,
Nuts.
I stopped working I have a communications business, but I stopped doing that in order to do city council full time,
Right.
which took all of my time. It really did take
Yeah.
all of I couldn't figure out how I was going to spare a few hours a day to do other things.
Right.
And that might have, I acknowledge that was my fault. I got into this rhythm, and then people were demanding my time, and I couldn't figure out how to get off that slope. But we just simply couldn't afford it anymore. That was part of it. My husband said, I'm happy to subsidize this, right? We'll go through the savings, and let's just keep you in that post. He was incredibly supportive.
Right.
He attended everything. He kept saying, I live here. I want you on my city council just
Right.
as Joe Citizen, right? And he kept saying he really wanted me to be the mayor.
Right.
And I just kept saying, that's no. And so then it started, the pressure to become mayor was strong.
Right.
I don't want to be mayor.
Right.
So
Right.
that was
Right.
another reason I left. But, I don't know how many people would have jumped into the race if I had stayed. But I don't think I could have taken an ugly race.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean,
Yeah.
that's stressful when
Right.
people criticize you and they
Right.
get negative on you. And I just didn't think I could take it.
I want that. Just wanted to serve.
And I also, so here's a huge part of it. When I left the Facts, I was leaving the Facts to choose what I was going to do when I grew up and do it. I still had some time.
Right.
But when I was leaving the city council, if I'm 51 years old, if I decide to go back to school, now what if I had toyed with becoming an attorney?
Oh, wow.
I toyed with becoming a dentist. I needed to be trained in something. My degree's in linguistics,
Wow.
right? I don't want to work in linguistics.
Right.
My work history is in communications.
Right.
I don't want to work in communications.
Right.
But I didn't know what I wanted to do. And you grow up and you always think, I could do anything.
Right.
And then I started looking at how long it would take me to become trained or certified in something new and realized I can't do anything. Doug wants me to retire with him in 10 years.
Right.
I don't have time.
Right.
If I serve another 4 years on the city council and then I start to start a career, it
Right.
doesn't work.
Sure.
The math doesn't work. So there were a lot of things at play, and there were a couple of things in the pro column for staying, but they just didn't compete, and I really agonized over it. I really did. So I would say to myself during the day, I'm going to run again, I'm going to get this stuff in order, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to keep pursuing my goals on the city council, try to accomplish things. And then at night I would be so stressed I couldn't sleep, so I would decide, nope, I'm not doing it. I'm at peace, and I could go to sleep and start this ridiculous 24-hour cycle again. So people would say, are you going to run again? And I would say, well, it depends on what time of day you ask me. Because I'm absolutely sure one way or the other during different periods of the day. So so I left, and I have not once regretted it. It was the right decision for me to get out. I'm not there. That's not who I am, and that's not who I want to be. And it's not that I condemn people who do. There was this weird guilt that I carried around when I got appointed. Because I have watched people as a journalist who wanted to serve in elected office. And they put so much time and money and energy into it. It was a goal. And they got political science degrees, and they knocked on doors, and they got shirts made, and they campaigned, and they worked so hard. And all I had to do, at no expense to me, was walk into chambers and ask for it. And boom, I'm sitting up there, and they have an engraved nameplate in front of me, and I'm on the dais. And I thought I would never have put the work into it. I wouldn't have done it. I don't want it that bad. And now I have it. So there was an odd conflict going on emotionally about that.
But, at the same time, I'd say it's something that you prepared for all your life without knowing you were preparing for it, right? It's amazing when time and chance come together, and you were who we needed at that time. And you did the research, you did the work. You just didn't know that as you were doing it, and part of the work is building credibility as well. You didn't know that you were doing it, that's what that energy and that seed planting and that investment would end up being for. You know what I mean? So
I think you're giving me too much credit, and I thank you for it. But I honestly was up there just being a journalist. I attended things and reported on them by writing columns and live tweeting and posting on Facebook and including, it was all about learning and reporting, seeking the truth and presenting it. And if there had been, let's say I was the mayor, or even still on the council, and we had a major earthquake or the terrorist event or something, and I was in charge, I wouldn't have felt like I knew what to do. If I had been in charge when we decided we need to separate ourselves from our city manager's contract that we had in place in 2018, when we made that decision, I wouldn't have known how to navigate that process. I would not have known. I feel like my areas of strength are, I know what kind of tone I should be setting. I know what kind of process for communicating with, like if I'd been in charge when COVID hit, there are some things that I would have liked to have done in terms of getting in front of people, in terms of getting communication out there, and trying to, because I could see the divide with people wanting to reopen and people wanting to stay closed. And I would have liked to have gotten out in front of people and tried to set a good tone of unity, but I don't know how effective it would have been. But in terms of the nuts and bolts of being a manager of the council, or even a member of the council, when you need to know how to be a council member, I would have just been a journalist, and that's not necessarily what we need.
Well, I would say that, you were what we needed at that time, and I'm glad you did it. So what we'll do is we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back because Toni's great. So Joespeak podcast. We'll be right back.